Livia Soprano is the kind of person who makes every room colder without raising her voice. On the surface, she looks like a sad, aging mother who never got a fair deal. She talks about being sent away, about people not caring, about the world going bad. But underneath that, she is working a plan. Her plan is simple: keep everyone around her small, worried, and guilty. That way, she never has to feel small herself. She doesn't shout to get this done. She sighs. She hints. She remembers things in a way that hurts. She predicts trouble and acts like she's only trying to help. If you ignore her warnings and do what makes you happy, she says you're selfish. If you listen to her and give up your plans, she says, see, I told you so. With Livia, you can't win, and that is the point. She controls a world where good news always turns into bad news, and she wants everyone to live by that rule. To understand why she treats people this way, you have to look at where she came from. Livia grew up in a time when life was hard, money was tight, and trusting anyone could get you hurt. She learned to expect the worst. Later, she married Johnny Boy Soprano, a man who did what he wanted and didn't explain himself. He brought home good times when it suited him and disappeared when it didn't. In that house, the power wasn't hers. She wasn't going to be the leader in the open, so she turned to the kind of power that doesn't look like power at all. She learned to control people by shaping how they felt. A dig dressed as advice, a story told at the right moment, a poor me look that turned other people into the bad guys. She didn't argue facts, she argued feelings. If she could make you feel guilty or nervous, then she didn't need to prove anything. You would bend yourself to her version of the truth. A lot of Livia's behavior comes from fear of not mattering, fear of being left behind, fear that joy is a trick and comfort is a trap. But fear alone doesn't explain her. She doesn't just hide from pain, she spreads it around so she won't be the only one feeling it. That's why she has a problem with almost everyone. If you find a little peace, she sees it as a personal insult. If you manage to laugh and mean it, she hears that laugh as proof she has been cheated by life. She can forgive mistakes. She cannot forgive ease. People who move light and free remind her of what she never had. So she knocks them off balance. She tells them the sky is about to fall. Then, when something, anything, goes wrong, she points and says, I knew it. This is what she does to Tony when he moves her into Green Grove. Tony sees a nice place with nurses, friends, and activities. He thinks he's doing the responsible thing. Livia doesn't argue about the beds or the meals. She argues about what it means. To her, this isn't care, it's exile. She turns his act of support into an act of betrayal. She wants him to feel like a bad son so that every future decision has to pass through that guilt. From then on, he isn't just managing his mother's needs, he's managing her story about him. That story says, my son put me away. In Livia's hands, a retirement home isn't a building. It's a weapon she can use whenever she pleases. She uses the same trick with almost everyone. Carmela brings food, and Livia treats it like an insult. Meadow shows independence, and Livia calls it disrespect. Janice tries to reconnect, and Livia says it's fake. Livia's rule is that no good deed should feel good. If kindness starts to feel warm, she turns down the thermostat with one sentence. Must be nice for you. People leave her house feeling wrong without knowing exactly why. They came to help. They walk away doubting themselves. That is her design. Because when you doubt yourself, you are easier to steer. Maybe the clearest example of Livia's power is what happens with Junior Soprano. Livia never tells Junior to do anything outright. She just gives him the one piece of information that will sting him the most. Tony is seeing a psychiatrist. In their world, that is not just therapy. That sounds like weakness and danger. Junior is already insecure about his place and about Tony's growing influence. Livia doesn't need to say, do something about Tony. She just needs to let the right words sit inside the right man. The rest happens by itself. If Junior makes a move, she can say she only shared a concern. If Junior hesitates, she can say she was only trying to protect the family. In either case, she gets what she wants. Tony suffers, and her hands look clean. This is how Livia works in a world of tough men. She doesn't pick up a gun. She picks up a sentence. She knows exactly which sentence will light a fuse in someone else's pride or fear. She knows how to let a story travel across the room and arrive in a mind that will do her work for her. And when the fallout comes back, she has one last trick. She forgets. Not everything, just the parts that would prove she meant harm. Livia's forgetting isn't simple confusion. It's a shield. She remembers facts that cut and forgets facts that bind. If you challenge her, she goes blank. I don't remember that. Now you look like you're yelling at an old woman. You might be right on the facts, but you'll be wrong in the scene. People back off because they don't want to be the bully. That is the beautiful part of her strategy. She uses weakness as a tool. You can't punish what looks like helplessness. You can't argue with someone who slips away from the argument every time you get close. She keeps the power and loses the responsibility. Outside the mob circle, you can see her method with Artie Bucco, a regular guy who wants to believe the best about people. Livia knows that. She speaks to him in the voice he trusts most, concern. She doesn't attack his restaurant, she worries about it. She doesn't insult him, she protects him. He feels honored and safe, right up until the moment he realizes that her worry has cost him money or peace of mind. By then, it's too late. She has planted the fear, he has acted on it, and the damage is done. He would sound petty trying to explain the whole chain to someone else. That's part of her power, too. The people she hurts don't have words sharp enough to trace how it happened. Carmela is not a fool. She senses Livia's game and pushes back when she can. But even Carmela gets cut by the same blade, guilt. Carmela tells herself she is holding the family together. Livia flips that into proof that the family is rotten and Carmela is weak for staying. If Carmela shows strength and sets limits, Livia calls it coldness. If Carmela shows softness and forgives, Livia calls it naive. Carmela wants a stable life built out of unstable materials. Livia wants to prove that no stable life exists. In their quiet battles, you can hear two different kinds of womanhood arguing with each other. One says, make the best of this. The other says, there is no best. There is only the mess. Janice is a special case because she is Livia's daughter and, in many ways, her student. Janice tries to use Livia's tools, tears, stories, timing, but wraps them in new packaging. Self-help talk, spiritual words, California calm. Livia hates this because it looks like theft. Janice wants to take the mother's dark skills and turn them into a brighter life. Livia answers with the one thing no daughter can dodge, the mother's memory. She tells stories that undercut Janice's progress. She reminds her of old failures. She pokes holes in the spiritual mask. Janice came home to show she'd grown. Livia shows her that in this family, growth is just another word for pretending. Janice ends up using the same trick she learned, and the wheel keeps turning. That is part of Livia's legacy. She doesn't need to live forever if the style she invented keeps going in her children. With Meadow and AJ, the pattern splits. Meadow has the language and the confidence to name what's happening. She can see when someone is twisting a knife and calling it advice. That makes her less easy for Livia to move around. Still, even Meadow feels the cloud that comes with Livia's presence. It's tiring to fight someone who always makes good look bad. AJ is different. He absorbs moods like a sponge. Livia's doom and gloom fit easily into his softer, more passive nature. He doesn't need to be targeted. He just needs to be nearby. Her view of life, that nothing works out and why try, slides right into his head and sits there. People often call Livia a narcissist or say she has borderline traits or depression. Labels can help, but they can also hide the truth in plain talk. So here it is in plain talk. Livia is built on envy and fear. She envies ease and fears need. If you walk through your life with a light step, she hates it because she never got to walk that way. If you ask for help openly, she hates it because asking is the one thing she promised herself she would never do again. She made a rule long ago: hope is dangerous, trust is foolish, and a person who doesn't expect to be hurt is a person waiting to be humiliated. Every move she makes flows from that rule. She would rather be right about pain than be surprised by joy. This rule is also why Tony can't shake her even after he grows up. He tries to run the family. He tries to be a decent father sometimes. He tries therapy. He tries buying solutions. He tries laughing it off. But the panic attacks say what his mouth won't. His mother's voice lives inside him. The ducks flying away from his pool feel like everything good leaving, not because the world is cruel in some random way, but because Livia taught him to see life like that. She trained him to expect loss, so even success tastes like a setup. He keeps living by her law while trying to pretend he isn't. People around the Sopranos dislike Livia for clear reasons. Time with her turns generous people into doubtful people. It turns strong decisions into moral traps. It turns closeness into a chore. You visit her because it's the right thing to do, and you leave feeling like you failed at something you can't name. But here's the stranger part. Even though they don't like her, they don't leave her alone. They keep orbiting. They don't want to be seen as cruel to an old woman. They don't want to be the one who abandons family. Livia builds a moral maze where leaving looks like sin and staying looks like virtue. She wins even when she loses because the rules of the game always lead back to her. All of this can make Livia sound like a cartoon villain. She isn't. She is a person shaped by a hard life and a hard time. She learned lessons that kept her safe. Don't show need. Don't trust charm. Don't relax. When she was young, Those lessons probably saved her from being used, forgotten, or laughed at. But lessons that work in one season can poison you in the next. Livia never updated the lesson. She turned it into a religion. In that religion, happiness is heresy and hope is a scam. So she polices people who get too close to either one. If there's a single sentence that explains Livia, it's this: she thinks she is protecting people by lowering their expectations. She believes that if she can make you doubt your plans now, she can save you from falling apart later. She has no idea how much damage that does. Or maybe she does and doesn't care, because the proof that things fall apart is more satisfying to her than the small chance that things might hold. When Tony finally explodes in her hospital room, she smiles because the scene proves her right. Love becomes rage, and she can say, "You see? This is what happens." She doesn't have to feel guilty, she gets to feel wise. Tony spends the series trying to break that spell. He wants to live in a world where a person can be more than their worst mood, where money can solve some problems, where laughter is allowed, where a meal shared is a moment of peace. Sometimes he reaches it. Then the old gravity pulls him down. The problem is not just the mob. It's the mother tongue of fear and guilt that Livia taught him and that he keeps speaking even when he tries to switch languages. He can fire people, make deals, even go to war, but he can't easily shut off the inner voice that says, "End it before it ends you." That voice sounds like his mother. Why did Livia have a problem with everyone? Because everyone kept trying little acts of hope, falling in love, making a home, sending a kid to school, setting a boundary, telling a joke, planning a future. Each of those acts made her feel exposed. Each act challenged the rule that had protected her all her life. Rather than rethink the rule, she punished the people who broke it. She did it softly, in a way that could pass as caring. That's why she's so hard to pin down and so easy to feel. She doesn't stab, she drains. She doesn't forbid, she forecasts. She doesn't claim victory, she accepts it as the fate she already knew. In the end, Livia's power isn't about schemes or big moves. It's about atmosphere. She makes people breathe a thinner air and call it normal. She convinces them that the smart way to live is to expect disappointment and to prepare for the worst by killing the best parts of themselves. Some people resist. Some people learn her methods. Some, like Tony, do both at once. But once you've lived under that weather, it's hard to remember what a clear day feels like. That is the tragedy of Livia Soprano. She didn't just hurt people. She taught them a way of seeing that keeps hurting long after she's gone. If there is a lesson, it is simple: love needs permission to grow. It needs room to be clumsy and hopeful and sometimes wrong. Livia could not give that. She offered a different kind of bond: shared worry, shared spite, shared proof that dreams are for fools. People disliked her because they felt themselves shrinking around her. They stuck around because walking away felt like a crime. And they carried her with them because a voice like hers, once it's inside you, sounds a lot like common sense. That is why Livia was the way she was, and why she kept clashing with everyone. She believed safety lived in smallness, and she worked to make everyone small. She meant to keep herself from being hurt, and she ended up hurting others as a way of staying safe. In a world of men who show power with fists and money, Livia shows a power made of hints and fears. You can't shoot at it. You have to outgrow it. And that is the hardest thing to do when the person who taught you to live is the same person who taught you to expect the worst.